I picked up my KTM from warranty service 181 days after leaving it there, which is 6 months, or to simplify, half a year. And that's where I should probably end this video. All the speculations about quality and service at the KTM brand, and show the credits. However, I feel obligated to tell this story and warn potential victims of the orange marketing of success. This video is also the only thing I can do as a user and customer, because any kind of legal battles are pointless. And publicizing my case might make some of you think twice before spending big bucks. And maybe that's what I would expect. Someone from the headquarters of our beloved KTM brand will look into the problem that users have to deal with. The material has been translated and will also be sent to KTM headquarters as a complaint and customer feedback form. Earlier this year, I recorded a comprehensive review of my motorcycle from a rider's perspective after riding 60,000 kilometers. There, I discussed some of the issues I encountered. Notable ones included problems with the turn signals, heated grips, the turn signal button, and issues with the electronics. Due to the mileage, I was close to a major inspection, including checking valve clearances. So basically it means disassembling the entire motorcycle into parts. I scheduled a service at my nearest authorized service center, Profi in Łódź, 30 kilometers from me. This KTM motorcycle was purchased new at the Profi Łódź dealership in May 2021. I am the original owner. It also came with an additional 2-year warranty. The motorcycle has always been serviced at authorized KTM service centers as scheduled. And most often it happened much more often. For example, to change the oil more often. I brought the motorcycle in on the 11th of February, and the service technician who saw me noted all the comments and suggested that I might have a problem with a worn wiring harness. A few days later, my suspicions were confirmed as I received a photo of the worn wiring. I recorded a video warning other users to pay attention to the condition of the harness during major inspections. Warranty repairs were first submitted for approval by the guarantor, car guarantee. Meanwhile, the service center informed me of the following: rear suspension play, repair costs around PLN 700. Remember this. Brake fluid needs to be replaced using a computer. I was persuaded to remove the SAS. Around the 4th of March, I received notification that the repairs had been approved. The parts were ordered, the indicator that was steaming, a handlebar switch that was not working properly, wiring harness, and clutch master cylinder, from which the paint was peeling. After that time, contact with the service center generally ceased. I no longer received specific updates on specific parts. Every now and then, I'd stop by the service center to ask what was going on. I'd be informed about the parts waiting list. If I remember correctly, I waited about 2 months for the wiring harness. The steering wheel control unit arrived in the 3rd week of June. Let's go back in time a bit, to around the fall of 2024. As we all know, KTM has been struggling with financial problems since last year, repeatedly verging on bankruptcy. The culmination was the filing for bankruptcy, which was widely reported in the media. I also recorded a video about the brand's problems, quality issues in customer service. On the 3rd of December, 2024, one of the Polish KTM dealers publishes a video explaining what was happening at KTM. Mr. presents the situation as if the brand is doing great, will get even better, and the problems are temporary. They hired a magician for airline restructuring, so overall, it's going to be awesome. I have no major complaints or reservations about the material here. Personally, I have a completely different opinion, but I understand the way the explanations are presented from a sales room perspective. However, I would like to discuss one short fragment of the film. In accordance with the law of quotation, for the purposes of polemic and critical analysis.
What about KTM motorcycle parts? Could this whole situation negatively impact availability? Could customers have reason to be concerned?
There's absolutely no stress when it comes to parts, because parts and accessories are KTM's highest margin business. KTM assured us that all deliveries will be made without interruption. Warehouses are constantly operating, and processes will likely be optimized. However, we're not worried about this.
Baila que baila la luna, baila que baila mi amor. Tengo la grande fortuna de estar en tu corazón. Baila que baila la luna, baila que baila mi amor. Tengo la grande fortuna de estar en tu corazón. Pa' arriba, pa' abajo, pa' el centro. Adivina qué es lo que yo quiero. Izquierda, derecha, pa' dentro.
As I mentioned earlier, contact from the service center had practically ceased. I'd drop in every now and then to find out we were still waiting for parts. Interestingly, around May, while at the Motor Wings motorcycle shop, I learned from a friend that the KTM Profi dealership had closed, and I'd better check if my motorcycle was still there as soon as possible. Luckily, the motorcycle remained disassembled in pieces. The service center was supposed to continue operating. It's just a shame that I, as a customer, wasn't informed of all this, because it's such a huge hassle to call and say, "Michael, this is how it is. Your motorcycle will be finished. Please don't worry. Everything will be fine." Apparently, explaining the situation to a customer who's paying a lot of money is too much. The wiring harness probably arrived around mid-April. The rest of the small parts arrived relatively quickly. As I mentioned, the longest wait was for the handlebar switch. In May, due to a problem with the availability of the control unit, I wanted to pick up the motorcycle because the delivery date was constantly being extended. When I reported this to the service center, because after all, if anything were to happen, I'd just swap it out and give them the old one. I was told that wasn't possible because the warranty claim was already in progress, and if they didn't close it, they wouldn't get their money back. In mid-June, I learned that the manipulator had arrived. So, it made sense to me that since the parts were here, the bike would be assembled in a matter of days. This was important to me, especially since my friends and I had a KTM Super Adventure Rally planned for the 26th of June. As it turned out, the service center hadn't yet managed to assemble the parts they already had. They still had to assemble the wiring harness. For the entire week of the 23rd of June, I tried to find out if the bike would be assembled. I was assured it was possible and that it would probably work. While at the service center on the morning of the 26th of June, I saw the mechanic assembling my rear shock absorber. Everything was fine, but I had scheduled his service around February, March. Of course, it didn't work out. I waited until about 3 p.m., so I arrived at the rally in the dark. I rode a borrowed BMW R1000 250 GS Adventure to the KTM rally. which is the ultimate testament to KTM's quality and service. The bike wasn't assembled. And at the beginning of July, the mechanic went on vacation for 2 weeks. As it turned out, he was the only mechanic in this service. The bike was supposedly nearing completion on the 14th of July. On the 21st of July, the motorcycle was supposed to be taken to a new Liberty Motors dealership service center to be connected to the computer, which means I'm supposed to have the service done at a dealership where they're no longer connected to the control center. Strange situation. This was supposed to take 1 day. On the 23rd of July, the motorcycle was checked on the computer and returned for further assembly. On the 25th of July, I haven't heard anything. On the 28th of July, at the end of the day, I receive invoices via email for the warranty and 60,000 service. On the 29th of July, I'm informed that I can pick up the motorcycle the next day. On the 30th of July, however, I have to wait for the underwriter to settle the invoice. On the 1st of August, I receive an invoice for the shock absorber repair. On the 5th of August, the service center accountant is on vacation. We're waiting for information from Car Guarantee. Interesting fact, the Car Guarantee hotline is open Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 12 a.m. On the 7th of August, I'm informed by Car Guarantee that the approval was on the 2nd of August, but they made the payment around the 5th of August. I have to wait for the service center to settle the invoice. On the 9th of August, after 4 p.m., I receive an email with the settlement amounts. On the 11th of August, I pick up the motorcycle. Let's talk about costs. Here, I'll show you the invoice amounts. I'll keep an eye on the screen to make sure I don't make a mistake. I have everything laid out nicely here. You can see it on the screen. Invoice 1, service at 60,000 kilometers. 788 euro. The service includes a general inspection of the motorcycle, excluding valve adjustments. They were supposedly within specifications. I also ordered the removal of the SAS, 235 euro. We can say this was something extra. We can subtract this from the amount, so for comparison with other services, table of sample prices for KTM authorized service centers in our neighbors. Please note that I did not receive any information from this service about the degree of wear of consumables. No service report, no acceptance and release protocol, no detailed parts, no information on the wear and tear of individual consumables such as brake pads, wheel bearings, discs, or tires. As a client, I don't need to know anything about it, right? Invoice 2, rear shock absorber service. Due to play in the rear shock absorber, I was informed by phone. I ordered it repaired. The play appeared, so since it already existed, it will only get worse. It won't go away on its own. It needs to be repaired. However, the repair cost nearly 437 euro. When I received a call in February-March informing me that the repair was necessary, I asked how much it would cost. I was told 164 euro. As it turned out, 164 euro. It was just labor. And I didn't find out the final cost until early August. I'll also explain one more cost here. Due to frequent problems with stators on KTMs, it's unfortunately a gamble. Failures can occur at mileage ranging from around 15,000 kilometers to 80,000 kilometers. Many factors influence this, including how many electronic accessories you have connected and the condition of your battery. If you have a weaker battery and a lot of accessories, the stator has to work harder, which can result in overheating and burnout. As it turns out, my unit was in really good condition. Perhaps, and that's my hypothesis, the lithium battery was a factor. I have plenty of accessories, but that's not the subject of this video. I just decided I needed to act ahead of time and replace something before it broke down on the road. The cost of rewinding the stator is €117, and the new gasket €26. One of the additional costs on the invoice is €94 for the removal and installation of the alternator, as well as a small oil top-up. The invoice describes this as an alternator inspection, but I don't know how it could have been checked, as it certainly wasn't measured, and the only check was to look at it. It cost PLN 400 net, unscrewing 12 alternator housing bolts, 4 stator bolts, unfastening 2 cable ties, and that mini top-up of 150 to 200 milliliters of oil cost €94. Of course, I incurred the additional cost of rewinding the stator and gasket. This was not part of the service's scope. I think it's time to expand our business and provide this type of service, because in my opinion, it's profitable. But seriously, I personally think that this amount is ridiculously high. Remember, the motorcycle was disassembled at the time, requiring no additional parts like fairings, fuel tank, or other components to be removed. Everything was exposed. The access was very good, so I wanted to do it faster. Invoice 3. Warranty parts. Here's an invoice for €3,374. This is the total amount for all warranty replacements. An important point to consider here is that because I purchased additional warranty insurance, €395, and had an additional 2 years of warranty, I didn't have to pay the full amount of €3,374. However, due to the motorcycle's mileage, I had to pay an additional fee, plus half of the VAT tax, which brought the total to €728. So, we should add up these amounts. That is to say, €728 plus €395. This totals €1,123. This is the amount I had to pay for the €3,374. Remember, it was my choice to purchase this additional insurance. KTM didn't give me anything for free here. In theory, without this insurance, I would have paid €3,374. And I'm aware that this 4-year-old motorcycle with 60,000 kilometers on the clock is costing €3,374 in parts that broke through no fault of mine.
We build our motorcycles to be reliable and robust for every race.
What influence did I have on the steaming turn signal? The inoperative control lever? On the peeling paint from the clutch master cylinder? Or even on the wiring harness that frayed on this motorcycle? That's definitely my fault too. What more can I say? Obviously, €728 seems like a better price to pay than €3,374, but it's something I, as a user, bear. The bike was out of action for 6 months. You could say the 2025 season was ruined for me thanks to the KTM. For this type of motorcycle in our Polish climate, the season lasts roughly, depending on the weather, from April to October. However, for longer trips, the impact of the shortening daylight hours is already noticeable from August. We're almost at the end of August, so realistically, there's about a month and a half or 2 left. Motorcycle comprehensive insurance is €773, so half of that amount essentially went to waste. €64 per month, €386 per 6 months. And if you tried to convert that into a percentage of the season, it would probably be about 70%. If the motorcycle was financed, add the installment X6. Not to mention the depreciation due to the passage of time. Year.
Upływ czasu. Mam tutaj na myśli upływ rocznika.
And what's even better, the depreciation due to a loss of trust in the brand. If you don't believe it, check how much you'll pay for a 2021 KTM 1290 and how much for a 2021 BMW GS 1250. An additional cost is the wear and tear of all equipment. 6 months is a quarter of the warranty on most items, from motorcycle accessories to equipment like clothing and other items. The same applies if you use any apps with an annual subscription. So if you don't use it, the warranty expires anyway. And once you go somewhere, the warranty expires. And if something breaks, you have to buy a new one. I started cooperation with a local off-road riding school. You know, they organize training events and trips. Of course, you can guess how much I earned with this motorcycle this year. I'll give you a hint. It's a pretty round sum. And now, finally, imagine the best part. You have a fleet of 5 to 10 such motorcycles. You run a driving school, a rental company, or organize trips with customers. And suddenly, various components fail on several of these motorcycles, just like I had. And you have to wait for parts, service, at an authorized service center, because that's what leasing requires. Time is ticking. And the customer isn't smiling. Fanaticism is a huge problem in our community. I might be generalizing a bit here, but I see it especially in Polish forums. For comparison, when I describe a problem in a foreign forum, I'm often met with support and harsh criticism of the brand's flaws. And I'm not just referring to KTM, the same thing happens on forums for Yamaha, Honda, Suzuki, BMW, and other brands. This is also evident in the comments under my video about the brand's decline in quality, where some people act like I insulted their mother. There are also people who will defend any absurdity. And listen here, I'm currently putting this together. I was going to post a fragment of a discussion with a guy who claims that a failed harness at 60,000 kilometers per hour is a common occurrence, and you need to be prepared for it. However, just yesterday, I stumbled upon this gem. A guy who thinks all these things are the result of laziness and unpreparedness. It's some kind of reverse logic. Following his reasoning, a courier delivers a brand new motorcycle to your home, and I understand that you disassemble it, replace it, and repair all the components that can be damaged: the harness, the stator, the crankshaft position sensor, and other sensors. This is completely abstract. This way of thinking is extremely far-fetched to me. I'll leave that for your comments. And that's how I learned that wiring harness damage is normal at this mileage. I know I worked as a motorcycle mechanic about 10 years ago while working part-time during my studies. I know some things have changed. But I didn't know that wiring harnesses have become a consumable item. I'll have to ask my friends who ride GS bikes how often they replace them. This lack of criticism of our favorite brands is a disservice to ourselves, because through such behavior, brands can afford to sell more and more, because customers will drive sales, no matter how badly they screw up. Ultimately, we, the customers, lose out. Why bother trying when the touters will generate positive PR anyway? A huge problem is also the spreading of unsubstantiated nonsense, like only the first years had it, then they improved it. People, don't assume that any salesperson or online mythomaniac is true. Verify your data. If someone claims that something has been improved since the newer model year, at least check if the part number has changed. Otherwise, you'll get exactly the same thing. Here's an example with the wiring harnesses. The wiring harness that was in my year had the same part number in the 21, 22, and 23 models. It is only in the 24 model year that it is changed. Another question is whether the problem is actually eliminated, because the 24th year is the newest year. Few users have driven this 24 model 50,000 or 100,000 kilometers to see if it's actually improved. Perhaps this is why there haven't been any problems with the wiring harness wearing out. Here's another example. Someone heard somewhere that there was a recall for the wiring harnesses. At this time, there hasn't been any recall for the 2021 Plus Super Adventure. The only recall involving the wiring harnesses was for the Super Duke. But that's a completely different bike. And if there was, please provide the service bulletin number date. I'll then issue a correction. Later, someone will read or hear this unverified nonsense and think everything is fine. For those who have had this bike for a while and are happy with it, I'm glad you're riding it without any problems. I was in your shoes at one point and was skeptical of every complaint. Don't take my comments as hate, but as a list of sensitive points to check. I'm not saying all these things will happen to you. They happen to me. And, as you will see in a moment, other people have problems too. I hope these bikes cover tens of thousands of kilometers without any unpleasant surprises. Now we can wonder whether the fault for this state of affairs lies with the service center, dealership, national distributor, the regional distributor, or the entire KTM brand. In my opinion, as a customer, KTM should be monitoring what's happening, because as a customer, I primarily come to a given brand, and it's in their best interest to ensure the customer receives proper service. The reverse situation, where the customer is responsible for this, seems pathological. I personally have a lot to complain about, both in the showroom and the service center. The first issue is the lie that the part, manipulator, was supposed to be waiting for me at the service center in the fall. The lack of ongoing information about the motorcycle's progress. Despite generating nearly 20,000 PLN in revenue, it was difficult to call or simply send a text message every now and then saying, "Mr. Michael, the turn signal arrived today, and the wiring harness is arriving next week. We're still waiting for the clutch master cylinder and handlebar switch." The lack of information about the dealership's closure. In this case, all they had to do was pick up the phone, call and say, "Mr. Michael, the Profi dealership will be closing, but don't worry, the service center will continue to operate as a separate company and will complete the repair of your motorcycle." Instead, I'm finding out in town after the fact. Yes, I know I'm repeating myself, and it seems natural, but as you can see, we need to keep educating people. The lack of work organization, empty declarations. As I mentioned, the last missing parts arrived around the 3rd week of June, and it was the joystick on the handlebars. So, over the previous months, they simply had to prepare other things. Place and route the wiring harness, repair the shock absorber, and prepare the motorcycle for a switch replacement. Instead, everything was left to the last minute. And I was unnecessarily misled until the very end, when I was determined to pick up the motorcycle on the 26th of June. They certainly knew that, in addition to assembling the motorcycle, they had to take it for a checkup in the service computer and for paperwork related to issuing invoices and guarantor approval. This motorcycle certainly wasn't the first or only one with this type of procedure. So they must have dealt with similar cases and must have realized how long it might take. So, in my personal opinion, that entire time of almost 2 months was needlessly wasted. However, all the paperwork could have been prepared the moment they received the final part to avoid wasting time. No vehicle acceptance protocol prepared by the service center. No service report. For example, here's what it looked like at the Lublin Service Center after 30,000 kilometers, where all procedures were meticulously described and indicated. Here, I received absolutely nothing. There's no information about the wear and tear of the motorcycle's consumables. Since I'm taking the motorcycle to a service center, especially an authorized one, I, as a customer, have absolutely no need to know what needs to be done and when. The service center should explain to me, as someone who doesn't know what needs to be replaced and when. I haven't received any information about the wear and tear of the discs, brake pads, or other consumables on the motorcycle. And according to the schedule, the next service visit should take place in 15,000 kilometers. It would be good to inform the customer about any potential repairs, but I haven't received any information. The date on the motorcycle's computer isn't programmed correctly. When I picked it up on the 11th of August, the motorcycle showed the 9th of March. And here's another thing I should show you. It's 9:07 a.m. The time is wrong. Okay, maybe the battery was disconnected. It happens. Go into the settings and enter the date. It's the 9th of March, 2025. The best part is, the computer was connected on the 23rd of July. The correct date and service interval are missing. The next service date shown on the screen is February 2026, and I'm picking up the bike in August. What am I supposed to say now that they've connected it to the computer? The next service date should be in July or August. One more thing though, the number of kilometers until the next service should be 15,000, not 5,800 kilometers. The fuel filler cap plug is damaged. This plug wasn't damaged before. The zip tie that was attached to it is new. Honestly, I've never disconnected it because I haven't even needed to. But even if I did, I could buy a similar plug for 10 to 15 PLN on Allegro and replace it. I think it's time to record a service video for the service center. Failure to show. Return used parts. As a customer, I might want to see them. Or maybe I'd consider using the parts from the removed SAS system. Technically, these parts belong to me. The service center didn't give me any discount when they took them. I asked for the accessory lines to be routed over the top of the fuel tank, so that if something breaks down on the road, I'd have easy access to them. How were the lines routed? They're located under the tank, of course. I've already noticed that some of the wires are routed in such a way that they're bent. Here's an example of the horn wires. Riding with a wire like this will likely result in the wire breaking and stopping working. So I need to fix that. And this is what it looks like on new motorcycles. The turn signal that was supposedly being replaced was dirty underneath. I decided to wash it. After washing, the turn signal fogged up. The same thing happened to the previous one. Even better, I was curious about the dirt marks, so I tested how quickly these turn signals get dirty. And what happened? I drove a few hundred kilometers, and this turn signal wasn't as dirty as when I picked it up. The turn signal housing itself is the same color as the other side, despite being 4 years old, which raises my serious doubts as to whether this turn signal was even replaced. The service, which cost less than 20,000 zloty, wasn't entered into the KTM electronic service book. It's not recorded there. So, there's nothing like a good service No simple apology, even if only for the fact that we didn't do a good job in some respects and that something could have been done better. Nothing here. Someone probably accused me of anecdotal evidence of minor incidents. True, I can't verify how many KTMs break down in what ways, because no one but KTM has this data. And from my own experience, I know that even KTM won't have all of it, because when reporting a defect to service, we, as customers, are told there's no point in reporting it, because KTM will reject it anyway, which automatically lowers the number of complaints. However, I can present you with the most verified evidence of this brand's quality, a stock chart. I think, after all, that customer wallets have the greatest impact on how this red line shapes up. You could also ask, how satisfied are those who paid down payments for the KTM 390 Rally, which was supposed to be released at the beginning of the year around March? It's now the end of August. And the same goes for those who, after last year's EICMA, were determined to buy the 1390 Super Adventure. How many kilometers have they done on them? However, the reviews of service centers across Poland are a nightmare. Reading through reviews, you might find 2 or 3 authorized service centers worth recommending. However, you don't take your motorcycle to an authorized service center to worry about the quality of service, because that level should be consistent across the entire brand according to the manufacturer's guidelines. And suddenly, a problem arises. You have to pack up the motorcycle, drive to the other end of the country, perhaps even take a trailer. Obviously, a major service every 30,000 kilometers will take more than a day, so you'll have to factor in the cost of renting a trailer, a hotel, maybe double the trip. What if the service center runs out of parts? Here's my request to former or current mechanics at any authorized dealership, especially KTM, but others are definitely welcome. If you have worked at an authorized dealership and would like to share your experience with the service centers and the services a given brand has provided to its customers, please contact me. I'd like to conduct an interview, but I guarantee complete anonymity. I also came up with the idea of letters from viewers. If you have any interesting long-term service battle stories for any brand, please feel free to contact me. I will be happy to discuss any case on this channel. This could be an interesting series. The more we raise awareness, the faster we can eliminate this mess from the market.
Hi Michael, Peter here. I have a 2020 KTM 1290 Super Adventure R, bought from the original owner, domestic distribution, well-maintained, no expense spared, a very well-resourced motorcycle. Before purchasing, it was inspected at the KTM service center in Krakow, where it also comes from. I was also provided with the full service history for inspection. First, right after purchasing, I did a major service, including a valve adjustment at 60,000 kilometers. As it later turned out, the valve clearances needed to be adjusted at an independent workshop after the Krakow dealership. Although the service history also listed the replacement of the SAS reed valves, after inspection in second independent service, it was obvious they hadn't been replaced. So I asked the mechanic to replace them. We also checked other things. This included servicing the clutch slave cylinder, which was 4,000 kilometers after a service, and cleaning, fluid change. I'll be doing that tomorrow, because the clutch slave cylinder has started leaking. This isn't the happiest part either. I haven't even managed to drive 10,000 kilometers since I bought it. The bike had 50,000 kilometers on it when I bought it. The ambient temperature sensor and the gearbox position sensor, not to be confused with the crankshaft position sensor, failed. The result was that an hour before I got home from the Polish KTM spot, the bike went into service mode. Finally, the bike ended up at a service center in Krakow, despite everything, because that was the only place available. The guys there replaced these items. When the bike arrived, it wouldn't start, even though I'd ridden it to the service center. They also disassembled it, cleaned the injectors, and tried to diagnose why it started firing on only one cylinder. And it cleared up on its own. Probably a combination of these issues. The electronics, the battery, the sensor, something must have worn out. I replaced the battery as a precaution, because even though the Yuasa battery was only 3 years old and tested good, it wasn't for the KTM. Perhaps this caused some stress on the sensors. The previous owner had 2 problems with the stator. The first time, it failed while riding in Italy and was replaced under warranty. The second time, the stator also failed, and he had it repaired at KTM Krakow. As it turned out, the Italians forgot to install a spacer. The Krakow Service Center added the shim when replacing the second stator. And now, even though the clutch slave cylinder has been serviced, it's starting to leak. I'm talking about the original clutch slave cylinder. Rebuilding it is pointless. A new one isn't worth the cost, so it's better to use a replacement. Besides the fact that it has some electronic sensitivity, there are cases during service, which later turned out at another service center when one of the service centers was installing the fuel tank. They pinched my fuel line. It might seem like a minor thing, but it would be good if service centers paid attention to the quality of this assembly. This could also end badly if the line frayed and fuel started leaking. What's most puzzling is that the service history indicated that certain maintenance had been performed, but an independent service center showed me photos showing that none of this had been done. Both the SAS reed valves were not new, and the valve clearances needed to be adjusted. That's the story. I think KTM has a lot to do with its authorized service centers to improve the quality of repairs. Not to mention investing in the quality of certain parts, which are quite crucial to keeping this bike running smoothly. After all, this is an adventure, so we want to ride it far and wide. I can't imagine going to Norway and getting stuck in the steppes, off-road, and that's the story.
Great. To clarify, Piotr, you are from the area of Rawa Skierniewice, and you had to take the motorcycle to Krakow.
Skierniewic, czyli województwo łódzkie, i motocykl musiałeś zawozić do Krakowa.
I had to take it to Krakow because the quality of service in Warsaw is poor. Just read the reviews. The same thing happened in Łódź, where you're based, where one service center closed down. Your bike sat there for 6 months, so after hearing your stories, I didn't even consider taking it to Łódź, which was actually the closest to me, and I ended up in Krakow, where it was purchased and serviced. Another recommended service center is Olsztyn, and potentially Wrocław, or the independent service center run Krzysiek Borys. As for KTMs, I don't know where else in Poland you can get these bikes reasonably serviced.
During this year's KTM rally, we stopped by a shop. Some people went shopping, while others stayed with their motorcycles and chatted. While we were chatting, I was looking at Wojtek's bike and was surprised to see that the area around the front exhaust manifold was quite dirty and dark. I walked closer and saw that it had an oil leak. It was a KTM 1000 290 Super Adventure R, 223, with 13,000 kilometers on the clock. An oil leak appeared from under the front cylinder, likely a damaged gasket. After the rally, Wojtek made an appointment with a service center in Warsaw. He was then told that the warranty had been rejected and he had to pay 500 PLN. Wojtek wasn't happy about this because his bike was brand new and had a 4-year warranty. Ultimately, the amount dropped to 255 PLN, a sum Wojtek didn't want to argue about. However, understand the context of a situation where you have a practically new motorcycle with a failing seal, and the user is responsible for paying a fine for owning the motorcycle. Wojtek had another experience with the service center where his muffler started rusting. And, as you might guess, the warranty was rejected. So, I don't need to comment further here.
My KTM journey began in 2019. In May of that year, I became the owner of a 1290 Super Adventure S. I didn't have many problems with this model, although I do have a few. After about a year, the rear shock absorber leaked. This is a known problem because the rear manifold wasn't factory insulated, and the heat generated was damaging the shock seal. KTM later introduced an insulated manifold, but unfortunately there was no recall, so I had to buy one myself, costing around 1,000 PLN. Fortunately, my shock absorber was replaced under warranty. The next problems I had were mainly electronic. A common preload adjuster error occurred, which blocked the rear suspension adjustment. It was important to remember not to adjust the suspension under load, for example, while riding the motorcycle. Unfortunately, taking this error to an authorized dealership after the warranty expired cost only 350 PLN for connecting it to a computer. In my case, the service technician couldn't reset the error on the KTM computer because either the shock absorber was stuck or the check engine light was on, but the shock absorber could be adjusted. What's that supposed to mean? And since I wanted to be able to change the shock absorber settings, I had the check engine light left on. And so, after paying the 350 zloty, I left the dealership with the check engine light on. Fortunately, after a dozen or so kilometers, the check engine light disappeared on its own. Furthermore, after a longer period of inactivity, such as during the winter, a front brake switch error started appearing. This later turned out to have nothing to do with the brake switch, but rather with the ABS pump. The authorized service center diagnosed the ABS pump and, considering the parts cost around 8,000 PLN, suggested looking for a used one. The diagnosis cost 500 PLN. Using the internet and several specialists, I managed to get my ABS pump working. It turned out that the pump had been frozen due to very infrequent braking with the ABS system activated. A few good brakings were enough, and everything returned to normal. Furthermore, the motorcycle stopped recognizing the key several times, resulting in a message on the display, even though the key was still in my pocket. And there was also a problem with the fuel level display. So far, these problems are a bit of a nuisance, but not serious. I've driven about 40,000 kilometers on this motorcycle. In 2023, I decided it was time for a change. I was considering a BMW GS, a Triumph, or an Africa, but the new 1290 Super Adventure S also tempted me. In the end, I opted for the latest version of the KTM 1290. Unfortunately, I didn't know at the time that the saying, "You can't step into the same river twice," would apply to me. I took delivery of the latest version of the KTM 1290 Super Adventure S at the end of 2023. The bike arrived at my dealership because of the snow already on the ground. My first ride took place around spring 2024. That's when the first problems began. The motorcycle would hiccup at a certain RPM range when accelerating. The first time it happened was during an overtaking maneuver. I panicked, braked, and ducked behind the car I was overtaking. I didn't know what had happened at the time, but over time, after the hiccup occurred, I was able to trigger it on command on several occasions. This happened before the first 1,000 kilometers, 620 miles. I returned the motorcycle for inspection and reported the problem. Of course, it was downplayed. First, they accused me of nudging the gear shift lever and that it was the quick shifter's fault. Then, they accused me of riding at too low an RPM in a given gear. The exhaust manifold insulation also leaked. This was around May 2024. Since there was no response from the authorized service center regarding my concerns, in early September 2024, I filed an official complaint regarding 1. Leaky rear exhaust manifold. This part is available from at least the 16th of July, 2024, at the KTM store in Olsztyn, within 3 business days. 2. Front brake. The brake lever becomes hard and bounces back when braking. 3. The motorcycle often fails to start, despite the key being held in one's hand or in motorcycle clothing. 4. Frequent errors. Front brake switch and preload adjustment. The latter prevents changes to suspension settings. 5. Jerks, chokes, and loss of power, which causes dangerous driving situations. For example, during overtaking maneuvers. This symptom occurs primarily around 60 km/h and in third gear, but also occurs in other speed ranges and with the gear engaged. 6. Oil leaking from the lower part of the engine near the drain plug. This problem appeared after the 1,000 km service at the authorized service center. After pointing out to the service center that the potential problem with the jerking could be a manufacturing defect in the flywheel, described on English-language KTM websites, the authorized service center only adjusted the gap between the flywheel and the sensor. It worked fine for a few hundred kilometers, but the problem returned. In the spring of 2025, I've been having constant problems with the motorcycle since the start of the season. With this in mind, at the end of March, I scheduled an annual inspection for the end of May 2025, specifying that I'm reporting any remaining problems with the motorcycle now to allow more time to repair these faults during that inspection and to prepare any necessary parts. Namely, 1. Front brake switch occurs randomly during virtually every ride. Typically, it clears randomly from the display at the beginning. 2. Rear brake switch occurs every time during every ride. Applying the brake pedal a few times is enough to trigger this error. It doesn't clear automatically. Only turning the motorcycle off for a moment clears the error. 3. Oil lever low warning. At a speed around 130 km per hour. Last trip with cruise control set. This error appears randomly, even though the oil level is close to maximum. 4. The motorcycle jerks, stutters, and cuts power again, causing dangerous driving situations. For example, during overtaking maneuvers, this symptom occurs mainly around 60 km per hour and in third gear, but also occurs in other speed ranges and with the gear engaged. This problem has already been reported and was supposed to be fixed, but it's reoccurring.
Ten problem był już zgłaszany i miał być poprawiony, a występuje znowu.
Because KTM experienced financial difficulties at the turn of 2024 and 2025, this unfortunately affected the availability of parts. My bike was in the service center from the end of May to the end of July. In the meantime, I was informed that they were aware of the KTM jerking problem and knew what to fix. Of the above issues, the temperature and oil level sensors, as well as the entire flywheel assembly, were replaced. The brake sensors were not replaced. Before picking up the bike, I was assured that the bike had been inspected and was now fine. Now what? After riding 1,000 kilometers, the hiccups and jerking persist. The rear brake sensor is silent for now, but the front still emits error messages. The dealership claims they don't have these sensors in stock, but I bought the front sensor from an official Polish KTM parts store. The bike now has about 9,000 kilometers on the clock. For some reason, the next service interval at the dealership is incorrectly set. Instead of the 26th of July and 15,000 kilometers, it's the 26th of July and less than 6,000 kilometers.
Lipiec 26 i niecałe 6,000 kilometrów.
I also wrote to the KTM headquarters with a complaint in English about my case. Unfortunately, no response. That they don't have parts, or that service times are long. But there were a few situations that shouldn't have happened, like letting me off with a check engine light, not checking for engine jerking and hiccups after replacing the flywheel, or this strange returns policy, where one dealer waits for parts from KTM warehouses, while another service center has the part in stock, the case of the manifold or front brake sensor. So, as far as I'm concerned, this was my second and last motorcycle with this manufacturer. I don't know what would have to happen for me to regain my trust in this brand. And here I haven't even touched on the problems other models have. They don't admit to mistakes and don't carry out service recalls. And it's users who, by publicizing certain issues, force KTM to take action. But if anyone wants to, they can find more information on YouTube or Facebook groups. So, that's all from me for now.
Now let me tell you about Tomek's story. We'll start with a 2024 KTM 890 Adventure R. Bought brand new, picked up on the 18th of December, 2024. First error after 75 kilometers on the 25th of January. He got an immobilizer error. On the 2nd of February, while changing tires, he had his steering dampers serviced. He felt the damper was underperforming and wanted to use thicker oil. As it turned out, the factory-assembled damper was clogged with air, so it's poorly assembled. On the 10th of March, with less than 200 kilometers on the clock, water started leaking from the radiator, as seen in the photo, from under the clamp on the thermostat housing. To find the leak, he had to disassemble half the motorcycle. After disassembling it and tightening the metal clamp, the leak stopped. The dripping was so intense that a puddle appeared in the garage. For about a month, the fuel level sensor error has been flashing red when he starts the motorcycle. This only happens for a split second. That's why there's no photo. And now for the best part. Service on the 30th of June, after 1,000 kilometers. The odometer showed 1,200. They filled the oil level to the minimum level. He noticed it immediately because the bike was rattling. The engine was making an unpleasant metallic sound, and they added almost half a liter of oil. So, from what Tomek wrote, they probably put in about 2.5 liters, even though the invoice stated 3 liters. The KTM should have had the oil level closer to the maximum. They tightened his clutch so much that he had to stop and adjust it on the way home, because there wasn't even a speck of play. He says it was tight as a lamb's balls. He also mentions that this happens all the time at Liberty Motors Łódź, as he had a similar problem with his previous Yamaha motorcycle. Another thing, they didn't check his air filter. It has a pre-filter, and there were no signs of inspection or removal. Similarly, they didn't check the spoke tension. Well, what's the point of checking the air filter on an off-road motorcycle? I mentioned to him that it would be best to create a hidden camera program where you take the motorcycle to a service center and watch what they do with it. Tomek also has a 1290 Super Adventure S, if I remember correctly, from 2022, and he had a few problems with it too. His headlight broke. It had cracks. This is a problem that sometimes happens on these KTMs. You have to pay attention to it. I've seen it on groups abroad, as well as in Poland. Tomek and I often laugh at each other when we start the bike, and we hear a characteristic screeching sound when starting it, and the bike throws up errors like MTC, suspension, preload adjuster, and damping. This error is very common on this bike. It most often occurs when the battery is weak, but it also occurs sporadically when the battery is good. Even if you install a new battery or switch to a lithium battery, the error persists. Unfortunately, I've had this problem myself, and even replacing the wiring harness doesn't improve the situation. Tomek also had paint flake off the reservoir after changing the clutch fluid, and that was also done under warranty. This is another thing that confirms that I'm not the only one experiencing this issue.
I heard about your electrical problems. I couldn't believe something like this could happen in this day and age, that it could happen on a premium motorcycle. Imagine I'm in Croatia, we're starting our vacation, climbing a hill, and the bike starts acting up. I'm riding alone, only with a load of luggage. As I'm climbing up the hill, the bike stalls. It comes to a complete stop with no response. I shift into neutral, turn it off with the button, and restart it.
Próbuję zrzucić bieg na luz, nie pokazuje mi jakiego się motocykl wyłącza.
It starts without a problem, and I continue riding. And so it goes again, 3 times, over a distance of 510 kilometers. I'm nervous. What could possibly happen? It's finally the start of a 2-week vacation, a long road ahead of me. And right from the start, the bike refuses to cooperate. I pull into a parking lot, put it on the side stand, and it won't start. No errors, just a message that the stand is down. Okay, the bike is upright. I fold the side stand up. Then I get a message that the side stand is down. So my first thought is the side stand sensor. I clean it and it shines beautifully. No dirt, no oil from the scuttler, nothing. And still the same thing. I put it on the center stand, it starts. I take it off the center stand, the engine cuts out. What's wrong? I put it upright, put it on the side stand, it cuts out. Strange. Maybe the position sensor? I check the vertical and sideways position, the engine cuts out. Something's wrong. I check all the fuses, the electrical system. I cranked half the bike in the parking lot. In the heat, sweat is pouring. The pain is increasing. I'm red with nerves. I remembered your wiring harness problem. So I checked both harnesses. I see some slack in the connector near the battery. Satisfied? I got it. I pushed the connector in. The bike starts, I put it on the side stand, the bike cuts out. What's wrong? With the bike running, I move the wiring harness, it cuts out. Oh, there's an electrical breakdown. I pull the harness away from the metal. Tighten the zip tie, it doesn't go out. I rock the bike sideways, and it's fine. Test ride. Accelerate, up and down, corner. Everything's fine. So, there was an electrical fault somewhere in the harness. It's secured. I've been doing the next almost 4,000 kilometers without any problems. So, by the end of the 2-week trip, I managed to forget about the problem. But I'll tell you about another experience with an authorized service center. I took my motorcycle to KTM in the fall for a checkup. They suspected a problem with the fuel pump or gasket. They replaced the gasket under the fuel pump. Of course, I waited a good month because they were constantly running out of parts. I picked it up in November, so the bike was put in the garage for the winter. I'm going on a longer trip this year for the May long weekend. I'm riding fast on the expressway at 150 kilometers per hour. I have half a tank, so I can easily make it to my accommodation. Suddenly, at 150 kilometers per hour, my engine stalls and cuts out, and the red fuel pump warning light comes on. I pull over to the shoulder, hazard lights on. It's a busy May-long weekend. I open the tank, start it. Well, I don't hear the fuel pump. There's probably fuel in the tank, as I can hear it. I push the bike through and take the first exit off the expressway. I start the motorcycle and see what's going on. There are no leaks. All the plugs seem fine. Suddenly, I notice one of the fuel valves is closed. The one by the pump was open, the one on the other side was closed.
Jeden był przy pompie odkręcony, jak powinien być, natomiast ten, gdzie jest listwa
I open it and fill up. Everything works. This is the second time the service center has done this to me. They returned the bike with the fuel valve closed. I managed to fix it. It wasn't comfortable. When the bike stalls at 150 kilometers per hour and you start to jerk, and you have to quickly and gently brake, put it in neutral and coast. However, if it happened to a beginner who was just starting to ride a motorcycle, and this happened to them on the expressway at that speed, I think it might have ended differently. It's worth mentioning this in the context of the quality of service at authorized service centers in Poland.
As you can imagine, my enthusiasm for the KTM brand burst like a balloon. Of course, I now have a working motorcycle, hopefully not temporarily, which is not worth selling, as the depreciation is significant, and the additional cost of something new is practically twice as much, not to mention how much I invested in it. I still maintain that it's a great machine, providing immense riding pleasure as long as everything works. You need to realize that this isn't a maintenance-free machine. You need to have some understanding of mechanics and electronics, and unfortunately, surprises can still happen. This bike has always been serviced at an KTM authorized service center, including the cases I mentioned in the previous section. I'm not talking about motorcycles pulled from accidents, assembled from 3 others, pulled into a tornado, and run over by a pickup truck. Nobody here is tinkering around, replacing a sensor with a resistor or some other piece of wire. Although a repair shop can repair a connector with cable ties, these are regularly serviced motorcycles without skimping on materials, and you can still win the bad luck lottery. And here you go. If someone has ridden 20,000, 30,000, or 50 kilometers and says, "I'm talking nonsense," okay, congratulations on your lucky find. I wish you to ride this motorcycle another 10 times that distance. Some might say, "What do you want?" After all, your motorcycle is finally repaired. Well, it's sort of true, but not entirely. I've been reporting problems with the joystick from the very beginning, 2021, and I've been trying to get it replaced under warranty for at least 3 years. As I mentioned, the dealership assured me the part would be ready by fall 2024. Fogging turn signal, a problem that was repeatedly dismissed by the service center after about 2 years of battling. Update with bug. Since at least June 2023, KTM hasn't fixed the update that causes the quick access button to not remember data. Then, try to have it remember the audio for C1, C2 in version v.0661. Turn the ignition off and on. Good luck. Okay, now we'll set the audio here and also set the audio here. Turning it off. Turning it on. Deleting messages. Don't remember. KTM quality. Electronic problems are a feature of this model, so don't expect them to fix it. For KTM, it's normal to randomly encounter preload adjuster, MTC, and suspension errors while starting. And you'll have to wait a few dozen seconds for the bike to restart, which, thankfully, will start without error. Just try riding like that in a group of other riders, and that group will have to wait for you. As a customer, I know I definitely won't buy a 1,390, certainly not at first glance. 6 months ago, I would have said that if they offered a 5-year warranty, I would have considered it. However, we have the same problem of enforcing that warranty. It takes a long time, and manufacturer defects are blamed on the customer as mechanical damage. So what good is even a 10-year warranty if you have trouble using it? Here's my example, where the manufacturer didn't apply protective film to the plastic under the seat, and this caused them to scratch. The complaint was rejected. In 2022, the protective film was already there. This video has been translated and also sent as a form of complaint and feedback to KTM headquarters. Perhaps some conclusions will be drawn. Or perhaps, probably, it will be thrown in the trash. In the next few months, commercials featuring the 1,390 will appear. Influencers and journalists will be invited for exclusive test drives in selected locations around the world, where, as usual, they'll find virtually no significant flaws with these bikes, other than, for example, a too short windshield, poor button layout, or a complicated menu, because most often it looks like this. They will drive the test for no longer than a few thousand kilometers, so that the customer can see the wonderful image of a perfect motorcycle. to probably end up looking for and developing solutions to problems. But let's not pretend I'm only negative and only know how to criticize. If KTM likes to present itself in the media so much, I propose a long-distance test. Get me a 1,390 motorcycle, and I'll do a long-distance review with an annual mileage of 25,000, 30,000 kilometer, trips across Europe and Asia, recorded and published using numerous cameras and drones, live reports with information on every plus and smallest flaw. Check out my report from my trip to Turkey. Just a few conditions. I don't pay for service, as I've already paid too much, and I have zero confidence in the dealership service. I take care of the fuel, tires, brake pads, oil, filters, and I can tell the truth. And if you need someone to audit service centers in Poland, you know where to find me. That's basically all I wanted to cover in this video. Finally, after 6 months, I'm picking up the bike and can start preparing it for the season, just as I plan to do in March. If anyone wants to practice their patience and stoicism, I highly recommend getting involved with the KTM brand. There's another advantage. If you have a wife or girlfriend who's hesitant about buying another motorcycle, show them this video to convince them that you need to have something in reserve. Of course, I invite you to subscribe and comment on this material constructively. I'll be posting new materials from the KTM project soon. The factory needs some improvements. We'll replace the clutch slave cylinder with one with a proper seal, not a piece of crap. We'll also improve the electronics and add a DMD. We'll also service the brake system. I plan to discuss the shimmy phenomenon in this bike in detail soon, because it's also a huge topic. So this is the end. Bye.